Only by living at the edge of death can you understand the indescribable joy of life. Shogun by James Clavell, Part 1 of 2. The Prologue. The year is 1600. A storm-battered ship, the Erasmus, limps across the vast Pacific Ocean, the sole survivor of a Dutch expedition. John Blackthorne, the pilot major, battles exhaustion and dwindling supplies, his crew ravaged by scurvy. He clings to the hope of reaching the fabled Japans, guided by a stolen Portuguese rudder, a mariner's handbook. A sudden cry of "reef ahead" shatters the night. Blackthorne's skill and determination are put to the ultimate test as he fights to navigate the treacherous reef and the raging storm, ultimately guiding the Erasmus to safety in a hidden bay. Book 1. Blackthorne awakens ashore, disoriented and weak, in a strange yet strangely comforting room. He is cared for by a woman he calls Honor, struggling to understand the unfamiliar customs and language. His relief at finding himself in the Japans is shattered by the arrival of a hostile Jesuit priest, Father Sebastio, who recognizes him as a heretic and warns of imminent danger. Blackthorne soon encounters Kasigi Omi, a young samurai who holds authority over the village. Omi's disdain for the priest offers a glimmer of hope, but Blackthorne is shaken by the samurai's casual brutality, witnessing the beheading of a villager for a seemingly minor transgression. He is allowed to walk freely within the village, but his crew is confined, and access to his ship, the Erasmus, is forbidden. Blackthorne reunites with his surviving crew, finding them divided in their opinions about their situation. Some, like Vink, revel in the pleasures offered by the village women, while others, like Jan Roper, see their arrival as divine punishment and fear the influence of the Catholic Church. Blackthorne urges patience, hoping to negotiate with the daimyo, the feudal lord of the province. However, their hopes are dashed when they are thrown into a stinking pit, ordered to choose one among them to die. The drawing of lots falls upon Vink, but Blackthorne defies Omi, refusing to let his crew be slaughtered without a fight. A desperate struggle ensues in the cramped pit, resulting in the death of Pietazun and the capture of a samurai, Masijiro. Blackthorne is brought before the daimyo, Kasigi Yabu, a cruel and arrogant man. Father Sebastio acts as interpreter, twisting Blackthorne's words and fueling the daimyo's hostility. Blackthorne, sensing the daimyo's hatred for the priest, gambles on a risky strategy. He publicly denounces the Jesuit and breaks a crucifix, hoping to gain Yabu's favor. Yabu, intrigued by the possibility of using the barbarians against the Christians, orders Blackthorne to be taught manners and the Japanese language. He is given the name Anjin, meaning pilot, and entrusted to Mura's care. Meanwhile, Kiku, a beautiful courtesan, is summoned to entertain Yabu. She witnesses the daimyo's strange fascination with the screams of a tortured crew member and his subsequent, unexpectedly quick climax in the presence of both Kiku and a young boy. Kiku, though disturbed by the night's events, finds solace in the beauty of the morning and the knowledge that her value has increased due to her involvement with the powerful daimyo. As Blackthorne begins to learn the Japanese language and customs, he realizes the power samurai hold over the land and the rigid caste system that governs society. He witnesses Yabu's cruelty and greed firsthand, but also recognizes the daimyo's ambition and desire for power. The arrival of Toda Hiromatsu, trusted general of Toranaga, the president of the Council of Regents, throws Yabu's plans into disarray. Hiromatsu confiscates the ship and its cargo, revealing that Yabu's actions have been betrayed. Yabu, forced to concede, offers the ship as a gift to Toranaga, hoping to salvage some advantage from the situation. However, Hiromatsu demands that Blackthorne be brought to Osaka to meet Toranaga, leaving Yabu with only the remaining crew as potential bargaining chips. Blackthorne, despairing at the loss of his ship and rutters, is surprised by the arrival of Vasco Rodrigues, a Portuguese pilot in Toranaga's service. Rodrigues, recognizing Blackthorne as a fellow pilot, offers him a chance to retrieve his belongings from the Erasmus. Blackthorne, aboard the Erasmus, discovers that his precious rutters have been stolen. Rodrigues, who had secretly searched the ship earlier, reveals his own desire for the rutters and his suspicion that they are in the hands of Father Sebastio. As the galley carrying Blackthorne and Rodrigues sets sail for Osaka, a storm erupts, threatening to drive them onto the treacherous coast. Blackthorne's seamanship proves invaluable as he helps Rodrigues navigate the storm, ultimately taking command of the ship when Rodrigues is swept overboard. Blackthorne, now in a position of power, demands to go ashore to retrieve Rodrigues' body. Hiromatsu reluctantly agrees, sending Yabu and a group of samurai to accompany him. On the rocky shore, Yabu risks his life to save the injured Rodrigues, revealing his own ambition to control the seas and his desire to make Blackthorne his vassal. Blackthorne, witnessing Yabu's courage and skill, begins to see the daimyo in a new light, his hatred mixed with grudging respect. He realizes that he now holds power over Yabu and the ship, and contemplates how to use this newfound leverage to his advantage. Blackthorne and Yabu are locked in a tense standoff, both men well aware of the shifting power dynamics and the uncertain future that awaits them in Osaka. On the journey to Osaka, Blackthorne and Rodrigues develop a grudging respect for each other, sharing their knowledge of the sea and their experiences with the Japanese. Rodrigues reveals his own fear of Blackthorne, sensing a hidden danger within the Englishman. He also confides in Blackthorne about the sealed package entrusted to him by Father Sebastio, suspecting it contains Blackthorne's stolen rutters and questioning the motives of the Jesuits. Meanwhile, Omi, left in charge of the remaining crew, faces his own challenges. He struggles with his conscience over the brutality he has witnessed and the orders he has been forced to carry out. He grapples with the complexities of samurai culture and the conflicting emotions of loyalty, duty, and ambition. He begins to question Yabu's motives and suspects that his uncle may be playing a dangerous game, putting the entire Kasigi clan at risk. Back on the galley, Blackthorne learns more about the political landscape of Japan, the power struggle between Toranaga and Ishido, another member of the Council of Regents, and the precarious position of the young heir. He realizes that his fate, and the fate of his crew, is intricately tied to the outcome of this power struggle. He begins to formulate a plan, hoping to use his knowledge and skills to bargain for his freedom and the lives of his men. As they approach Osaka, Blackthorne's anxiety increases. He knows that he will soon be facing Toranaga, the most powerful daimyo in Japan, and that his life hangs in the balance. He prepares himself for the encounter, determined to use all his cunning and wit to survive. The galley arrives at the bustling port of Osaka, and Blackthorne is filled with trepidation and anticipation as he prepares to meet his fate. Book 2. Following the storm, Rodrigues recovers and reveals to Blackthorne the vastness of Japan and the surprising number of Christian converts. Blackthorne, in turn, shares his knowledge of European politics and the threat posed by Spain. As they reach Osaka, Blackthorne is overwhelmed by the city's size and the imposing Osaka castle. He is brought before Toranaga and endures a tense interrogation with Father Alvito, acting as interpreter. Blackthorne attempts to gain Toranaga's favor by highlighting his skills as a pilot and emphasizing the threat Spain poses to both their interests. However, his mercenary background and the ambiguity surrounding his fleet's intentions raise suspicion. The meeting is interrupted by the arrival of Ishido, Toranaga's rival, who mocks Blackthorne and demands his execution. Toranaga, playing his own game, orders Blackthorne imprisoned with common criminals. Blackthorne finds himself in a brutal and overcrowded prison, forced to fight for survival. He encounters Friar Domingo, a Spanish Franciscan monk imprisoned by the Jesuits for defying their authority. Domingo reveals the Jesuits' corrupt practices and their desire to control all trade and influence in Japan. He also shares his knowledge of the Black Ship, a yearly treasure-laden vessel that travels from Macau to Nagasaki. Blackthorne learns much about Japanese customs and politics from Domingo, realizing the power struggle between Toranaga and Ishido will determine his own fate. On the fourth day, Blackthorne is unexpectedly released from prison. Blackthorne is led through the city by Ishido's samurai, but is ambushed by bandits who kill his guards. Just as the bandits are about to take Blackthorne away, Yabu arrives with his samurai and drives the bandits off. Yabu, recognizing Blackthorne's potential value, intends to use him to gain power and influence over Toranaga. Toranaga, angered by Ishido's attempt to take Blackthorne, confronts him and reveals his knowledge of the Amida Tong, a secret society of assassins. He summons Yabu and questions him about the Tong, suspecting Yabu's involvement in the attack. Yabu, aware of his precarious position, offers his support to Toranaga in exchange for control of additional provinces. He proposes a plan to train gun samurai using Blackthorne's expertise to secure victory in the coming war. Toranaga, though skeptical, agrees to the plan and seals the bargain with Yabu in a symbolic gesture. Toranaga summons Mariko, a Christian samurai woman, to act as interpreter for Blackthorne. Blackthorne, initially wary of Mariko's Catholic background, begins to share his knowledge of the world and reveals the existence of the Treaty of Tordesillas and the papal lines of demarcation that grant ownership of Japan to Portugal. This revelation shocks both Mariko and Toranaga, forcing them to question their previous assumptions about the world and the motives of the Church. Blackthorne further gains Toranaga's trust by sharing his experiences in the Arctic and his knowledge of European politics. However, a cultural misunderstanding regarding sodomy creates tension and highlights the vast cultural differences between them. Father Alvito, summoned by Toranaga, faces his own dilemma. He realizes that Toranaga needs the Church's support to secure victory against Ishido, and is willing to offer significant concessions in return. Alvito, torn between his loyalty to the Church and the opportunity to gain exclusive influence in Japan, decides to present Toranaga's offer to the Father Visitor and the Christian daimyos. He also provides Toranaga with Blackthorne's stolen rutters, hoping to discredit the pilot and secure his execution. However, Toranaga reveals his own plan to use Blackthorne against the Portuguese and offers Alvito a deal: the Church's exclusive right to preach in Japan in exchange for the Christian daimyo's support. Alvito, recognizing the immense power this bargain holds, agrees to consider the offer. An assassin from the Amida Tong infiltrates the castle and attempts to kill Blackthorne, but is thwarted by Naga, Toranaga's son. Toranaga, realizing Blackthorne's importance, orders his protection increased and plans to send him to Izu with Yabu to begin training the gun samurai. He also reveals to Hiromatsu his belief that the Christians are behind the attack. Blackthorne, unaware of the danger he is in, enjoys the comfort and attention provided by Toranaga's servants. He is informed of his imminent departure to Izu and expresses his desire to have his crew and ship returned. Mariko, struggling with her own doubts and suspicions, attempts to learn more about Blackthorne and his background. She is ordered to accompany Blackthorne and Toranaga's wife Kiri to Yedo, leaving her conflicted and apprehensive about the future. Father Alvito reveals to the Father Visitor and Captain General Ferreira, the leader of the Black Ship, Toranaga's demands for information regarding the Church's past actions and the lucrative silk trade. Ferreira, enraged, suggests eliminating both Toranaga and Blackthorne, but is warned by Father Delacqua of the dire consequences such actions would bring. The arrival of Friar Perez, a Spanish Franciscan who defies the Church's orders and vows to preach openly in Japan, further complicates the situation. Delacqua, facing a multitude of threats, proposes converting Blackthorne to Catholicism and offering Toranaga a share of the silk trade in exchange for his support and a delay in the regent's meeting. Alvito is tasked with negotiating this delicate bargain, aware that the future of the Church in Japan hangs in the balance. Toranaga, aware of his precarious position and the threat of betrayal, reveals his vulnerability to Alvito and demands the Christian daimyo's allegiance within 40 days. He also hints at the possibility of Naga converting to Christianity and offers the Church exclusive rights to preach in Japan in exchange for their support. Alvito, recognizing the opportunity to secure the Church's future, agrees to try and influence the daimyos. Toranaga, gambling on this desperate bargain, awaits the outcome, knowing that failure will force him to declare war and fight for his survival. Toranaga is filled with both hope and trepidation. Blackthorne, shaken by his recent and brutal experiences and Mariko's explanation of the practice of ritualized suicide, seppuku, takes solace in the familiar routine of piloting the ship. He learns about the ever-present threat of earthquakes and tsunamis in Japan, gaining a deeper understanding of the Japanese reverence for life and their acceptance of death. As the galley approaches Anjiro, Blackthorne contemplates his next move. He knows that Toranaga holds the key to his freedom and the success of his ambitious plan to secure trade and influence in Japan. He prepares himself for the encounter, determined to use all his skills and knowledge to win Toranaga's favor. Upon reaching Anjiro, Blackthorne is reunited with his crew, finding them demoralized and fearful. He learns that Omi has been mistreating them, and his anger and desire for revenge resurface. However, he knows that he must remain patient and focus on his larger goals. Toranaga summons Blackthorne and reveals his decision. He will accept Blackthorne's plan to build a modern navy for Japan. Blackthorne is overjoyed, seeing this as his chance to achieve his ambitions and return home a hero. He pledges his loyalty to Toranaga and vows to help him defeat Ishido and secure control of the empire. However, Blackthorne soon realizes that navigating the treacherous waters of Japanese politics will be even more challenging than navigating the open seas. He faces suspicion and hostility from Yabu and other samurai, and Mariko's loyalties remain divided between her Christian faith and her duty to Toranaga. Meanwhile, Father Alvito and the Jesuits, having secured significant concessions from Toranaga, plot to eliminate Blackthorne and maintain their own influence in Japan. They see Blackthorne as a threat to their power and a potential source of heresy. Blackthorne, unaware of the danger he is in, focuses on learning the Japanese language and customs. He begins to train the gun samurai, hoping to create a force that will secure Toranaga's victory. He also develops a deeper bond with Mariko, who is torn between her attraction to Blackthorne and her loyalty to her husband and her faith. As the power struggle between Toranaga and Ishido intensifies, Blackthorne finds himself caught in the middle. He knows that his fate and the fate of his crew hangs in the balance. He must use all his cunning and wit to survive and achieve his goals. He has gained Toranaga's trust and secured a chance to fulfill his ambitions, but he is surrounded by enemies, and the path ahead is fraught with danger. Book 3. Blackthorne, now a high-ranking Hatamoto under Toranaga's protection, finds himself in the village of Anjiro, tasked with training Yabu's samurai in the use of muskets and European warfare tactics. He is frustrated by the lack of resources and the language barrier, but Mariko's presence as interpreter proves invaluable. He begins to develop a grudging respect for Yabu, recognizing the daimyo's ambition and cunning. However, the arrival of Ishido's envoy, Nabara Josen, throws Yabu's plans into disarray. Josen demands to know the reason for the musket training and reveals that the Council of Regents has reconvened with Ishido as its new president. Yabu, realizing he is caught in a trap, is forced to reveal his plans to Josen. Omi, sensing the danger, advises Yabu to kill Josen and his men to keep the guns a secret. Yabu, hesitant at first, eventually agrees. Naga, Toranaga's son, also present at the meeting, expresses his own disapproval of guns and the barbarian influence, arguing that they threaten the samurai way of life. Blackthorne watched in horror as Naga's men, on his command, leveled their muskets and unleashed a volley of fire at Josen and his remaining samurai. The deafening blast echoed through the valley, and the air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder. Josen shrieked as he was struck by multiple bullets, his body jerking and twitching in agony. His men fell around him, some dead instantly, others writhing in pain. Naga, his face cold and emotionless, ordered his men to reload. The surviving samurai of Josen's party, realizing their hopeless situation, chose to die with honor. 3 of them knelt and committed seppuku, their bellies ripped open with their own blades before their seconds swiftly decapitated them. The last samurai, overcome with fear, was unable to take his own life. Naga, recognizing the young man's terror, offered him a swift and honorable death by ordering his lieutenant to act as his second. Josen, still clinging to life, watched in terror as his men were slaughtered. He cried out for mercy, but his pleas were met with laughter and scorn. Naga, his vengeance complete, left Josen to the mercy of the dogs that had been drawn by the commotion. Blackthorne, witnessing the brutal execution of Josen and his men, is horrified by the casualness with which the samurai take lives. He struggles to reconcile his own values with the harsh realities of Japanese society. He finds solace in Mariko's presence, but their growing bond is threatened by the cultural and religious barriers that separate them. Meanwhile, Toranaga, having escaped Ishido's trap in Osaka, returns to Anjiro with Buntaro, Mariko's husband. He is impressed by the progress of the musket training and reveals his own plan to form 9 assault battalions to counter Ishido's forces. He orders Mariko to remain in Anjiro to continue assisting Blackthorne, despite Buntaro's objections. Buntaro, harboring a deep hatred for Mariko due to her father's treachery and her own defiance, takes out his anger on her in a fit of rage. Blackthorne, witnessing the abuse, is torn between his desire to protect Mariko and his understanding of the cultural norms that forbid his interference. Mariko, refusing to give in to Buntaro's demands, reveals to Blackthorne the truth behind her marriage and the hatred that festers between them. She explains that her refusal to submit is her own form of revenge against Buntaro for leaving her alive after her father's betrayal. Blackthorne, now understanding the complexities of their relationship, is filled with admiration for Mariko's strength and resolve. He realizes that he is falling in love with her, but knows that their love is forbidden. Toranaga, observing the tension between Blackthorne and Buntaro, realizes that he needs to keep them both in check. He orders Mariko to stay in Omi's house, effectively separating her from Blackthorne. He also intensifies the training, pushing both Blackthorne and Naga to their limits. As the training progresses, Blackthorne begins to understand the Japanese mind and their way of life. He learns to appreciate the beauty of their culture and the importance of honor and duty. However, he still struggles to accept the brutality and the rigid social hierarchy that governs their society. Later on, Toranaga receives a message from Osaka, indicating that the Council of Regents is about to convene. He knows that he must act quickly to counter Ishido's move and secure his own position. He begins to formulate a plan, hoping to use Blackthorne's knowledge and skills to his advantage. Blackthorne and Mariko sat in companionable silence, sipping their sake. The night was alive with the sounds of the inn, the gentle murmur of conversation, the tinkling of samisen strings, the rhythmic splash of water in the baths. But their thoughts were far away, consumed by the uncertainty of their future and the shadow of war that loomed over them. Despite the cultural and religious barriers that separated them, they had forged a bond that transcended their differences. They were 2 souls adrift in a turbulent sea, clinging to each other for survival. The following morning, they set out for Mishima. The journey was uneventful, the road lined with rice paddies and small villages. As they approached the city, Blackthorne was struck by the imposing presence of the castle. Its stone walls and imposing towers, a stark contrast to the humble wooden structures that surrounded it. They were met at the city gates by a contingent of samurai, led by Hiromatsu himself. The old general greeted Mariko with a curt nod, his eyes lingering on Blackthorne with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Mariko bowed and followed the general into the city, leaving Blackthorne in the care of Yoshinaka and his men. Blackthorne watched them go, his heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. He knew that Mariko was walking into danger and he was powerless to protect her. Yoshinaka led Blackthorne and his party to a nearby inn, where they were given comfortable rooms and served a delicious meal. Blackthorne tried to relax and enjoy the respite, but his thoughts were constantly with Mariko. He paced restlessly in his room, wondering what was happening at the castle and what fate awaited them. As dusk approached, Yoshinaka returned with news. Mariko had been summoned to a private audience with Hiromatsu, and she would not be returning to the inn that night. Blackthorne was consumed with worry, but he knew that he could do nothing but wait. He spent the night studying his dictionary, trying to distract himself from his anxieties. But every sound, every shadow, sent his heart racing. He longed for the dawn, hoping that it would bring news of Mariko's safety. The next morning, Yoshinaka arrived with a message from Hiromatsu. Mariko was safe, but she would be delayed in Mishima for a few more days. Blackthorne was relieved, but he was also frustrated. He wanted to be with Mariko, and he was eager to continue his journey to Yedo. He spent the next few days exploring the city and practicing his Japanese with the locals. He found the people of Mishima to be friendly and welcoming, and he was surprised by the number of Christians he encountered. He even attended a mass celebrated by Father Alvito, who greeted him with a surprising warmth. As the days passed, Blackthorne's anxiety for Mariko grew. He had no way of knowing what was happening at the castle, and he feared for her safety. He tried to convince Yoshinaka to let him go to the castle to see her, but the samurai refused. Blackthorne was forced to accept Yoshinaka's decision, but he was determined to find a way to see Mariko. He knew that he had to do something, but he was unsure of what. Then, on the fourth day, a messenger arrived from the castle. Mariko was to be released, and she would be returning to the inn that evening. Blackthorne was overjoyed, and he eagerly awaited her arrival. As dusk approached, Mariko returned to the inn, accompanied by Hiromatsu himself. Blackthorne rushed to greet her, his heart filled with relief and joy. Hiromatsu watched them with a thoughtful expression. He had seen the love in their eyes, and he knew that they were more than just friends. He had also learned much about Blackthorne from Mariko and his own spies. He knew that the Englishman was a skilled seaman and a cunning strategist. He also knew that Blackthorne was fiercely loyal to those he cared about. Hiromatsu asks Blackthorne to help him save Toranaga and the realm. Blackthorne stared at the general, his mind racing. He knew that this was a dangerous game, but he was also aware that this could be his chance to secure his freedom and the lives of his men. Hiromatsu outlined his plan. He would disobey Toranaga's orders and launch an attack on Ishido's forces as soon as the rains ceased. He would use Blackthorne's knowledge and skills to train his samurai and lead them into battle. Blackthorne listened intently, weighing the risks and rewards. He knew that this was a gamble, but he was also aware that this could be his only chance. With Blackthorne and Hiromatsu locked in a secret alliance, both men determined to save Toranaga and the realm, even if it meant defying their lord's orders and risking their own lives.